Hello everyone and welcome to the Unanswered Questions True Crime Podcast.
I have spent hours and hours investigating this.
He basically told her that people have been killed. Journalists, independent investigators, people like that disappeared. It frightened her to the bone.
There's more to the story than meets the eye.
There were rumors of torture and homicide and sexual abuse, all sorts of egregious, horrendous crimes.
He was polygraphed 3 times. Each of those 3 showed evasions.
His resumes were a skeleton of truth.
He was mad at the world, and particularly mad at the government.
The study that he commissioned had described a fictional terrorist attack.
If people have died over this, it means you're getting close to the truth.
You don't have to be a conspiracy theorist to say, what the fuck?
Hello everyone and welcome to another episode of my new podcast, Unanswered Questions, where every week we'll endeavour to discuss a mysterious unsolved case that has many lingering unanswered questions. So I hope you enjoy it, and as always leave me some feedback on what you think about the show and rate it as well. Now on to the show. This week we'll be talking about the various Vietnam War booby traps. Now, a military booby trap is designed to kill or injure a person who activates its trigger or employed to reveal the location of an enemy by setting off a signaling device. Most, but not all, military booby traps involve explosives. Part of the skill in placing booby traps lies in exploiting natural human behaviours such as habit, self-preservation, curiosity, or inquisitiveness. A common trick is to provide victims with a simple solution to a problem, for example, leaving only one door open in an otherwise secure building, luring them straight towards the firing mechanism. An example that exploits an instinct for self-preservation was used in the Vietnam War. Spikes, known as punji sticks, were hidden in grassy areas. When fired upon, soldiers instinctively sought to take cover by throwing themselves down on the ground, impaling themselves on the spikes. The Vietnam War was infamous for the guerrilla warfare the American forces were largely unprepared for. The Viet Cong were on home turf and used this to their advantage when it came to creating and laying booby traps. Not only were these cost effective, but the bamboo used to construct many of the traps didn't register on the mine detectors used by the United States. The goal of the traps was to maim, not kill, as this required the American soldiers to deal with their wounded comrades, slowing them down. This was made worse by the use of secondary traps, which targeted those attempting to help the injured. It's alleged that 11% of deaths and 17% of US troops wounded between 1969 to 70 were the results of traps and mines. In 1965 alone, for example, this number was at 70%. These booby traps also had a devastating psychological effect on soldiers, greatly reducing morale. They were already fighting in difficult jungle terrain, and they also had to be on guard for well-disguised Viet Cong booby traps. Now we come to the effects of these traps. Booby traps are indiscriminate weapons. Like anti-personnel mines, they can harm civilians and non-combatants during and after the conflict. The use against civilians is prohibited by the Protocol on Mines, Booby Traps and Other Devices, and the protocol also prohibits booby trapping, e.g. the wounded or dead, medical equipment, food and drink. Now we come to a bit of a history of these traps. A type of booby trap was referred to in an 1839 story in the News Times, and during the Vietnam War, motorcycles were rigged with explosives by the National Liberation Front, the NLF, and abandoned US soldiers would be tempted to ride the motorcycles and thus trigger the explosives. In addition, NLF soldiers would rig rubber band grenades and place them in huts that US soldiers would likely burn. Another popular booby trap, which I'll go into in a minute, was the grenade in a can. This was a grenade with the safety pin removed in a container and a string was attached, sometimes with the grenade's fuse mechanism modified to give a shorter delay than the 4 to 7 seconds typical with grenade fuses. The NLF soldiers primarily used these on doors and attached them to tripwires on jungle paths. Now we get into a list of the common booby traps that were found during the Vietnam War. First off, we have the punji stick. The punji stick or punji stake is a type of booby trap stake. It is a simple spike made out of wood or bamboo, which is sharpened, heated, and usually set in a hole. Punji sticks are usually deployed in substantial numbers. The Oxford English Dictionary, 3rd edition, 2007, lists less frequent earlier spellings for punji stake or stick. That is, spelt is P-U-N-J-I, but the different ways it has been spelled are P-A-N-J-A, P-A-N-J-E-E, P-A-N-J-I-E, P-A-N-J-I, and P-U-N-G-E. Now we get into the description of the trap. Punji sticks would be placed in areas likely to be passed through by enemy troops. The presence of punji sticks may be camouflaged by natural undergrowth, crops, grass, brush, or similar materials. They were often incorporated into various types of traps, for example, a camouflage pit into which a soldier might fall. It would then be and I'm going to butcher this name, trou de loup. Sometimes a pit would be dug with punji sticks in the sides pointing downwards at an angle. A soldier stepping into the pit would find it impossible to remove their leg without doing severe damage, and injuries might be incurred by the simple act of falling forward while one's leg is in a narrow vertical stake-lined pit. Such pits would require time and care to dig the soldier's leg out, immobilizing the unit longer than if the foot was simply pierced, in which case the victim could be evacuated by stretcher or fireman's carry if necessary. Other additional methods included coating the sticks in poison from plants, animal venom, or even human feces, causing infection or poisoning in the victim after being pierced by the sticks, even if the injury itself was not life-threatening. Punji sticks were sometimes deployed in the preparation of an ambush. Soldiers lying in wait for the enemy to pass would deploy punji sticks in the area where the surprised enemy might be expected to take cover, resulting in soldiers diving for cover, potentially impaling themselves. The point of penetration was usually in the foot or lower leg area. Punji sticks were not necessarily meant to kill a person who stepped on them. Rather, they were sometimes designed specifically to only wound the enemy and slow or halt their unit while the victim was evacuated to a medical facility. Now we come to the use of the punji sticks in the Vietnam War. In the Vietnam War, this method was used to force wounded soldiers to be transported by helicopter to a medical hospital for treatment. Punji sticks were also used in Vietnam to complement various defenses such as barbed wire. Bow trap. The bow trap was a simple yet effective booby trap employed by the Viet Cong during the early days of the Vietnam War. A bow, pulled taut and prepped to launch, was attached to a tripwire. When an American soldier set it off, the bow released right where they were standing, resulting in a direct hit to the middle of the body. Additionally, the same guerrilla units would set up this type of trap within a small pit. In these instances, the bow was angled upwards so the projectile would strike the enemy in their lower extremities. Bamboo whip. Bamboo whips were another brutal booby trap employed by the Viet Cong. A bamboo pole was attached to a tripwire and pulled back with a lot of tension. The pole had 3-foot-long spikes attached to it, so when the tripwire was triggered, whoever tripped it would be impaled by the spikes as the pole whipped forward. According to We Are the Mighty, the pole and its spikes could travel up to 100 miles per hour. As with punji sticks, the spikes could be covered in poisonous material to further impact the victim's ability to heal. Swinging mace. The swinging mace operated in a very similar way to the bamboo whip, but rather than be attached to a stick, the spikes were on a 24-inch clay, wooden, or metal ball, which was triggered by another tripwire. Typically, the ball weighed upwards of 40 pounds. This was one of the more brutal tactics utilized by the Viet Cong, as when the hidden ball was triggered, it would use the force of gravity to swing down from a tree and inflict terrible wounds to a soldier's upper body, in particular their head and upper torso. Tiger trap. The tiger trap was another Viet Cong booby trap that, like the swinging mace, caused significant injury to a soldier's upper body. The trap was sprung when the intended victim triggered a tripwire, causing a wooden plank imbued with metal spikes to fall on them. This was made all the more brutal by the addition of weighted bricks or other objects on the board. Snake pit. Snake pits were primarily used within the Viet Cong's tunnel systems. A poisonous snake would be attached to a piece of bamboo and when released on the victim would place the reptile in the perfect location to attack. Snake pits were encountered by American tunnel rats, but the Viet Cong would put snakes in other locations too, such as in their bags or in old weapon caches. Bamboo pit vipers were a common snake used by the Viet Cong. Within a few minutes of being bitten, the flesh surrounding the bite turned neurotic, swollen, and extremely painful. However, the Malayan crate was the most infamous, earning the nickname the two-step snake, sometimes mischaracterized as the three-step snake. This is rooted in a myth that a soldier bitten by one was killed in a short time it took him to move 2 steps. Cartridge trap. Cartridge traps operated in a similar way to punji sticks in that they were placed within a hole in the ground. An ammunition round would be set within a tube made from bamboo with a nail and wooden board placed underneath to act as a mock firing pin. Camouflage was then placed over top to prevent enemy soldiers from detecting it in advance. When they stepped on the booby trap, the soldier's weight would activate the ammunition and fire it through their foot. As such, these were sometimes called toe poppers. The extent of the injury was largely based on the size of the shell. Smaller ones often left men permanently disabled, while larger shells were fatal. Grenade in a can. As the name indicates, the grenade in a can was constructed by placing a grenade with its safety pin removed into a can which held down the striker lever. A tripwire was then attached, and when tripped would pull the explosive out of the can and cause it to detonate. This type of trap could either be constructed with a single can and a stake, or with two. If the two cans were used, they were mounted on trees or other sides of a path, with a tripwire running between them. These booby traps were typically positioned in a stream and along the entrances to the Viet Cong's tunnels. Rigging war trophies. These booby traps were created based on the fact that American troops enjoyed capturing the flags of their enemies. When Viet Cong guerrillas were forced from their bases, they'd rig their flags with explosives which detonated when the US soldiers took them down. The Viet Cong knew the Americans also enjoyed taking other items as war trophies, and as such, they rigged them with similar explosives so that, if the enemy combatants wanted to take anything from abandoned camps, the explosives would detonate, causing additional casualties. Flag bombs. The NVA and VC loved to fly flags, and they knew US troops loved to capture enemy flags, so when they were forced to leave a base or location, they often rigged the flags with an explosive of some kind, so that when the US troops started to take down the flag, it would set off the charge. In fact, any attempt to move the polar flag set off the booby trap. This is similar to a keepsake loose hand trap, where the NVA would intentionally rig anything a US troop would consider a war trophy with an explosive. Mudball mines. Mudball mines were essentially M26 hand grenades and M33 hand grenades encased in sun-baked mud or clay. The Viet Cong removed the safety pin on the hand grenade so that the dried mud or clay held the spoon in position and prevented it from being released. When stepped on, the mud case would crack apart, jostling the spoon to initiate the explosion. Since mudball mines were easily concealed and camouflaged, the device could be easily missed even by seasoned soldiers. Anti-helicopter booby traps. American forces commonly used Huey helicopters to insert troops into battle and evacuate casualties. The North Vietnamese Army and VC developed countermeasures to attack helicopters while they attempted to land. One tactic involved mounting grenades, mortar rounds, and other explosive devices on trees along the surface of the landing zone. These booby traps were set off when the helicopter hit a tripwire strung between loosely placed poles on the ground. According to the aforementioned Marine Corps report, a 13-year-old Vietnamese boy was once forced by the VC to place hand grenades at various landing zones. The Viet Cong instructed the boy to wrap the grenade's levers with string and place pieces of paper attached to the ends. The report said that when a helicopter came into land, the helicopter's rotor wash would blow the paper, unwrap the string, and detonate the booby trap. Booby trapped bike. A very simple trap. A watch and battery are located in the headlight, set to explode at a fixed time. Arrow firing device. A hollow section of bamboo is tied to a block of wood, which in turn is secured to a ledge or tree at chest height. An arrow is inserted into the bamboo section. The end of the arrow is secured to the release device and is fired by a rubber band attached to a tripwire. Venus flytrap. The Venus flytrap consists of a rectangular framework with overlapping barbs and placed in a pit on trails or in a rice paddy. The barbs inflict injury, especially when the victim attempts to withdraw his leg out of the trap. Booby trap hut. These were very dangerous to search because of the infinite variety of traps that could be used. Anything that could be lifted, slid, moved, open had to be treated as suspicious. A frequent Viet Cong trap used in known Viet Cong camps was to place a rubber band around and over the striker lever of a hand grenade, remove the pin and hide it in the thatched roof. After searching the huts and to deny the VC of re-inhibiting them, they would be torched. The rubber band would melt, releasing the striker lever and detonating the grenade. With that, this case remains open, but with many unanswered questions that still remain unanswered. Please rate this show and let me know what you guys think about this and the many other cases I've covered. You can follow me on all major social media platforms, YouTube, BitChute, Dailymotion. I'm also on Twitter and Instagram, links are all down below in the description. If you have a case you'd like me to have a look at or cover, don't hesitate to send me a message. I'm your host, and this has been the Unanswered Questions podcast. Until next time. Next on Unanswered Questions. The Dr. X killings were a series of suspicious deaths by curare poisoning in 1966 at a Bergen County, New Jersey hospital.